Hello, my name is Peter Sherrill. I was born in the city of Mount Vernon, and I'd like to take the time to introduce you to my latest literary work, Exodus, Why I Became a Republican. Now, after nearly 40 years of being a Democrat, I finally decided, after realizing certain things, that the Democrats have not done anything of significance for the African American community, probably since the signing of the Voting Rights Act with Martin Luther King. And what I also come to realize is that they never did anything willingly. The Civil Rights Act, Martin Luther King had to force them to sign that. The Voting Rights Act, Martin Luther King had to insist on them signing that. And if you look at some of the things in our history politically, some of our most tremendous gains have been under the Republican Party. And me, myself, considering myself well-educated and knowledgeable, had no idea whatsoever that this was the case. School desegregation came under the Eisenhower administration, and affirmative action, most of that, even though it was signed into law by the Democratic Party with Kennedy and Johnson, Richard Nixon did more for affirmative action than either one of these people. And with the school desegregation, that was major achievement for us yet, and which is my biggest concern. Even though we are more educated than we have ever been, we have more black politicians than we ever had, we have more black judges than we've ever had, more black lawyers, police officers, firefighters, etc., yet we remain the highest unemployed, the highest incarcerated group of people. And I begin to wonder, why is that so, and how could that possibly be if we have made all these advancements in society? I had a lot of questions. And when I left corporate America and entered into government, I began to realize that although we are in office, we are not in power. And I began to really look at our education system. And that has been a failure not only in my community of Mount Vernon, but throughout the whole country. There's this one scenario in all of urban America. We are the highest unemployed, we are the highest incarcerated, and we are the highest in high school dropout rates. Now, looking at these three dynamics, where and what have we achieved so far? And if you look at these cities throughout urban America, with all this crime, killing, drugs, you have to ask, who's in charge of these cities? And I began to realize these are all cities run by Democrats. Some African American, some not, but most of them are Democratic cities run by Democrats. And we've been facing these same problems for decades now. And if our educational system is failing, then our system is failing. And that means we are failing our youth. Because if they're not educated, what opportunity do they have in the future? And so my focus became on the future of our people politically and socially, economically and educationally. And it was like, where do we go from here? We have a black president. And what does that mean for us? And what has it meant to us? I have seen nothing of significance in the African American community. In the book Exodus, where I became Republican, I began to look at the black church and its lack of relevancy for the African American people, especially the young people. We're not talking about the people my age and older. We're talking about our youth coming up. And one of the things I realized is that for almost 40 years, when I first had the opportunity to vote at the age of 18, I was to automatically just go out and I was supposed to register Democrat. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, now, 40 years later almost, why? Why? Because I'm an African American? Is that the only reason why? And I began to look at where we are politically and how important our vote is. And I began to look at the Democratic Party and how they've taken our vote for granted. And my mission is to open up the eyes and minds and ears of my people, especially and specifically, to reevaluate their loyalty to the Democratic Party, which has not done anything of significance for the African American community for over the last 40 years. And that is why I decided to become a Republican. And people are looking at me and saying, how could you become a Republican? They're like, they're racist. And I'm like, yeah, so are the Democrats. So are the Democrats. If you look throughout America, if you look in Washington, D.C., the vast majority of politicians are white male politicians. We are not represented to a great degree in Washington, D.C., or in the state, or in the county for that matter. In the county of Westchester, we have a county executive election coming up. Now, the Democratic Party had an African-American candidate who was the highest ranking Democratic candidate in the county, majority whip. Yet, he was not considered good enough to be the candidate for the county executive position. And I said, wow, these are the reasons, this is one of the reasons why I left. And as I began to look at the black leadership and the black church, they were all doing this for one reason and one reason only, for their own personal gain, politically, financially, economically. And I became totally disenfranchised with the black leadership and the black church and how they are basically using our people for their own benefit. And through that, I just decided that, you know what? I no longer want to be affiliated with such confusion, to people who are selling out their own people like they did into almost slavery. They're just selling out to the highest bidder. I really, truly believe that making this transitional switch from Democrat to Republican can make all the difference on how our vote is received. And if we leave the Democratic Party, which is why I entitled the book Exodus, we need to leave Egypt. It's time to leave Egypt and get off that Democratic plantation once and for all.